there's so much to it. I mean, I could go a lot more into synchronicity and all of those things, but I guess as a result of the thesis, I really just was hoping that there could be just a little bit of openness to these concepts. The topic of inspiration also came forward really strongly for me and what that means. And I see it as almost like we have us and we have three circles that are interlapping of intuition, imagination, and inspiration. And that all those three have different elements that communicate to us. And I mean, I think a really solid scientific explanation could be just that it's biology. It's an aspect of biology. We have the ability to be intuitive. And I think some of us who are a little bit, like to play around a little more imaginatively, could entertain the collective unconscious and the quantum physics aspect. But what I really think is really important is just that we learn to honor what comes forward for us, whether it's a dream, just to look at it. I think there's a danger in jumping and going, oh my gosh, we're psychic, and this means this is going to happen. And that was something I looked at a little bit, is when our intuition can actually be a kind of a complex. So sometimes we can think something really strongly, but that's actually a stress response. So I think it's important just to look, just to pay attention, look at the image, explore, play around with it, see what happens. And I think in the looking, sometimes we become a little bit more open to the benefits of that. I'd just like to finish, before you have time for questions. One thing I thought was really neat in reading the Red Book is how Jung describes his relationship to the mystic as a scientist. And I just thought it just touched something in me. We'll see what you all think. He says, "The spirit of the depths forced me to say this, and at the same time to undergo it against myself, since I had not expected it then. I still labored misguidedly under the spirit of this time, and I thought differently about the human soul. I thought and spoke much of the soul. I knew many learned words for her. I had judged her and turned her into a scientific object. I did not consider that the soul cannot be the object of my judgment and knowledge. Much more are my judgment and knowledge the objects of my soul. Therefore, the spirit of the depths forced me to speak to my soul, to call upon her as a living and self-existing being. I had to become aware that I had lost my soul." And of course, if we look at the Red Book, we see that Jung really explores a lot of mystical ideas, his own imagery, all of those things. So I guess that's what I'm hoping, that as a result maybe of reading this or just entertaining these concepts, that scientists or anyone can just look at these concepts a little bit more deeply and include them in our worldview. So thank you.
So we have time for a couple of questions, if anybody has one they'd like to ask. What did your family think?
I think that there was some resistance.
What did your family think?
There was some resistance. I think once my mom read it, it was kind of like, oh, okay. And then a few days later, I noticed I got a little email saying things like, well, science is always trying to quantify, but you can't really quantify things. And all of a sudden, it was like it trickled into their brains a little bit. And I mean, it's like, and I felt some validation from that, where I felt, for the personal aspect of writing the thesis, that I felt that I had space that I could stand in these concepts. So thank you for that question. Yes?
I'm interested in you mentioning intuition, imagination, and inspiration, because I find that in the work I do, especially maybe artistic work, I get an image that, and I'm looking for a sense of where to go, and imagination for me would be the image, inspiration would be the guidance, and intuition is the skill of working with what I get and knowing what might be my own addition to it, and what is of a different nature. And I find it interesting that you would have this intuitive sense of the three belonging together, because in my own experience they are inseparable. An image by itself is not much if it doesn't take you somewhere, but you need to figure out
appreciate you saying that. I do think that artists and people that are involved in the creative endeavors are really maybe have a big capacity to have intuitions. And I do think that for many artists, that's a guiding force. I appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you.
Okay, we're down to it. What?
He's busy. He's still here.
Yeah, I know. We've arranged this. We've actually positioned Christopher's presentation here because, as he says in his abstract, he wants to reformulate the notion of depth that honors the fruits of ongoing